The wind howled across the frozen land like a wild beast, carrying sharp blades of snow that cut against the skin. The night sky was black, and the stars were hidden behind thick storm clouds. A single human walked through the storm, his boots sinking deep into the icy ground with every heavy step. His name was Daniel, a traveler who had wandered far from the safe colonies. Daniel pulled his coat tighter around his body, but even that did not stop the cold from biting into his bones. He had been walking for hours without rest, searching for shelter. The silence of the land was broken only by the storm, and he thought he was truly alone in this frozen wasteland, until he saw movement in the snow at first. He thought his eyes were playing tricks. The storm twisted shadows and light in strange ways. But then in the corner of his vision he saw a hand, small and trembling, reaching weakly out from beneath a pile of metal scraps half buried in ice. Daniel's heart jumped. He ran closer and dropped to his knees. There, half covered by snow, was a girl. Her skin was pale but faintly glowing with a soft bluish light. Her hair was tangled and frosted with ice, her lips were blue, and her body shook as if death was already wrapping its hands around her. For a moment Daniel hesitated. This was no human, this was an alien. Her ears were longer, her face thinner. Her eyes, closed now, had strange markings around them. He had heard stories of her kind. Some said they were dangerous. Others whispered that they were cursed. But right now all he saw was a dying girl. "Hey, stay with me," Daniel said, his voice rough against the storm. He pulled off his heavy coat without thinking, wrapping it tightly around her freezing body. His own skin screamed against the cold, but he did not care. He lifted her gently into his arms. Surprised at how light she was shivering, barely conscious, her eyes opened just a little, glowing faintly in the dark. She looked at him with confusion, as if not believing he was real. Her lips moved and a whisper escaped, not in human tongue but in her alien language. Daniel had never studied it, but somehow in that moment, he understood the word cold. She breathed before her head fell against his chest. Daniel looked around. The storm was growing worse. If he stayed here, they would both die. He had to find shelter. Somewhere out of the wind, somewhere safe. He carried her through the snow, his legs burning with effort. The weight of the storm was against him, but the small weight in his arms gave him the strength to keep moving. Every few minutes he looked down at her, making sure she was still breathing. Sometimes her body shook, sometimes she went still, and fear gripped his chest. He spoke to her as he walked, his words more for himself than her. "You're not dying out here, not while I'm here, you hear me? Hold on just a little longer." Finally, through the snow, he spotted the shadow of a broken cabin. It was old, maybe abandoned for years, but it was still standing. He kicked the door open with his shoulder and stepped inside. The air was cold inside too, but at least the wind could not reach them here. He laid her gently on the floor and closed the door tight. Snow still slipped in through the cracks in the walls, but it was better than outside. Daniel's hands were shaking, not from fear but from cold. He tore apart old wood furniture in the cabin, breaking it into pieces. His fingers were numb, but he worked until sparks caught and a small fire came to life. The orange glow filled the room, pushing the shadows away. He looked back at the alien girl. She was still wrapped in his coat, her face pale, her chest rising slowly. He pulled her closer to the fire, keeping her hands near the warmth. Her eyelids fluttered and she opened her eyes again. This time she looked at him longer. Her voice was weak, broken. "Why, help me, human, not safe." Daniel frowned. He understood her words somehow, though it made no sense. "Because you need me," he said firmly. "That's reason enough." Her lips trembled and she whispered something else. A name soft as falling snow. He caught it. Her name was Lyra. Before he could ask more, her eyes closed again, but this time not from weakness, more like trust. She slept, safe under his coat and by the fire. Daniel sat against the wall watching the flames. His body ached, and his skin burned from the cold. But his mind was full of questions. Who was this alien girl? Why was she left out there in the snow to die? And why did he feel as if saving her had just pulled him into something far bigger than he could imagine? Outside, the storm howled like an angry beast. But inside the cabin, one small fire burned. A human and an alien girl, two strangers, sharing warmth against the frozen night. Neither knew it yet, but this meeting in the snow would change both their lives forever. The fire cracked inside the old cabin, filling the air with the faint smell of smoke and burning wood. Daniel sat near the flames, his back pressed against the cold wall. His eyes never left the alien girl lying close to the fire, wrapped in his heavy coat. Her name echoed in his mind again and again. Lyra. She had whispered it before falling into sleep. The sound of it felt strange but soft. He did not know her people, did not know her world, and yet, saying her name in his heart felt natural. Outside, the storm raged on. Snow slammed against the wooden walls, and the wind howled like monsters waiting in the dark. Daniel knew they were not safe here for long. The cabin was weak, and the storm might tear it apart before morning. But leaving now with her in this condition was impossible. He moved closer and checked her breathing. Her chest rose slowly. Her skin still glowed faintly, a light that seemed to fight the shadows. Daniel pulled the coat tighter around her. His fingers brushed her hand. It was still icy cold. He frowned, whispering softly, "Come on, Lyra." "Stay with me." After a while she stirred. Her eyes opened, glowing faint blue in the firelight. She looked at him with confusion. Her lips moved, and she whispered again in her language. The words were broken, but Daniel somehow understood them. "You should not help me," she said, her voice shaking. Daniel leaned closer, his brows narrowing. "Why not?" Her gaze shifted to the door as if she expected someone to burst in. Fear flickered in her glowing eyes. She swallowed hard and whispered, "Hunters. Looking for me." Daniel felt his chest tighten. "Hunters? Out here in this storm? Who would abandon a girl in the snow and then send hunters after her?" He wanted to ask more, but she suddenly tried to sit up. Her body shook with weakness, and she almost collapsed again. He quickly caught her. Holding her gently, "Easy," he said. "You're safe here. No one's getting through this storm tonight." She shook her head weakly. "You don't understand. They will never stop if they find me. They kill you too." Her words sent a chill through Daniel that had nothing to do with the snow outside. He studied her face carefully. She was afraid, not just of dying, but of what might happen to him for helping her. "I've been running all my life," she whispered. "But the snow was too strong this time, I thought. It would end here." Daniel looked at her, his jaw tightening. He remembered the stories he had heard in the colonies. Stories of aliens who were cursed, marked by fate, abandoned by their own people. Was Lyra one of them? He didn't know, but he did know one thing. He couldn't leave her. "You're not alone anymore," Daniel said, his voice calm but firm. "I found you, and I'm not letting you die out there." For the first time, her eyes softened as if she wanted to believe his words. She lowered her head against his chest. Too tired to argue further, hours passed slowly. The storm showed no sign of ending. Daniel fed the fire again and again, breaking whatever wood he could find every time the fire grew low. Fear crawled inside him, fear that she might slip away into the cold darkness. Near dawn, the storm eased just enough for Daniel to hear something else. His ears caught faint sounds outside, footsteps crunching in the snow. Heavy, deliberate, not the sound of the wind. Daniel's heart raced. He moved quickly to the door, pressing his ear against the wood. Yes, voices low and sharp, not human. The words were strange, but he understood enough. She must be close. "The cursed one cannot survive the night without help," one voice hissed. Daniel's eyes narrowed. They were looking for her already. He turned back to Lyra, who was barely awake. Her face went pale, and she whispered one word with terror. "Hunters." He rushed to her side. "They're here," he said quietly, "but don't worry. I won't let them take you." She grabbed his hand weakly, her grip surprisingly tight despite her weakness. "Why? You don't know me. You risk your life for me." Daniel looked at her, his eyes steady. "Because leaving someone to die in the snow isn't human. And I won't stand by while they hunt you like an animal." Tears welled in her glowing eyes. She wanted to argue but couldn't. She only whispered, "Thank you," before falling weakly against him again. Daniel's mind raced. The cabin would not hold against hunters. He had no weapons, no plan, only his will. He looked at the fire, then at the small window showing pale light through the snow. If he stayed, they'd be trapped. If he ran, the storm and hunters both waited. He clenched his fists for the first time in his life. He felt the weight of something larger than himself pressing down on him. This was not just about survival anymore. This was about protecting someone who had already been abandoned by everyone else. Daniel whispered to himself, "No matter what happens, I'll get her through this." Outside, the footsteps grew closer and shadows moved in the snow. The hunters were near. The night was ending, but the real danger had only just begun. The pale morning light crept through the cracks of the broken cabin walls. The fire was still burning, but weaker now. Daniel sat with his back against the wall, his eyes sharp and fixed on the door. He had heard the hunters in the storm, and he knew they were close. Beside the fire, Lyra slept. Her breathing shallow but steady, she still clung to his coat, her glowing skin flickering faintly like fading light. Daniel glanced at her, then back to the door. His mind raced. He had no weapon strong enough to fight armed hunters, but leaving her here was not an option. The crunch of snow outside grew louder, slow, heavy, and deliberate. Shadows moved past the small window. Daniel's heart pounded. He reached for a broken chair leg he had sharpened into a rough spear during the night. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. A sudden knock echoed against the door. Not polite but hard, demanding, a voice followed. Rough and inhuman. "We know you are inside. Human, hand her over and we will let you live." Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked at Lyra, who stirred at the sound. Her eyes opened halfway, glowing with fear. She whispered, "Hunters." Daniel pressed a finger to his lips, signaling her to stay quiet. Then he stood, his grip tight on the makeshift spear. He shouted through the door, "I don't know who you're talking about." "There's no one here but me." The hunters laughed, a deep, cruel sound that echoed in the storm. Another voice growled, "Do not lie, human, we followed her scent. The cursed one is inside with you. Bring her out before we burn your shelter to the ground." Lyra's body shook. She tried to rise, but Daniel knelt beside her and held her down gently. "Stay still, you're too weak," he whispered. She looked at him with wide, glowing eyes. "They will kill you if you protect me." Daniel leaned close, his voice low but steady. "Let them try." Before she could reply, a loud thud shook the door. The hunters were testing its strength. Daniel's heart raced. He grabbed Lyra in his arms. She was light, too light, like her body had lost all its strength. He carried her to the back of the cabin, searching for another way out. There, a small window, broken but still wide enough. He set her down carefully, then pushed the glass shards aside. The cold air rushed in, cutting against his skin. Lyra looked at him with weak confusion. Where will we go?" "Anywhere but here," Daniel said. He lifted her through the window first, shielding her body with his arms as best as he could. Then he climbed out behind her. The snow outside was knee-deep, and the wind hit them like knives behind them. The cabin door cracked as the hunters slammed against it. Their growls grew louder. The chase had begun. Daniel pulled Lyra against his chest and started moving through the snow. His legs burned with effort, every step heavy. The storm had calmed slightly, but the air was still sharp and cold. His breath came in clouds of steam. Lyra buried her face against him, whispering weakly, "You shouldn't do this." "They will never stop." Daniel's voice was firm. "Then I'll never stop either." He pushed forward, weaving through broken trees and piles of ice. But he could hear the hunters behind him now, 3, maybe 4 of them. Their heavy boots crunched closer, and their voices cut through the wind. "The cursed one cannot escape. She belongs to the snow." Daniel spotted a fallen log ahead. Hollow inside, he ducked beneath it, pulling Lyra into the shadows. He held his breath as the hunters' footsteps grew louder. Snow crunched just meters away. Through the gaps in the log, Daniel saw them. Tall, fur-covered creatures with glowing red eyes and sharp spears. Their faces were hidden behind bone masks carved with symbols. They sniffed the air, growling. One of them stopped, sniffing, then snarled, "She is close, I can smell her fear." Daniel held Lyra tighter. Her body shook against him. He placed his hand over her mouth gently, not to silence her, but to reassure her. His heart thundered in his chest, but he did not move, not even an inch. Minutes felt like hours. The hunters circled the area, searching. Their footsteps crunched around the log, then slowly drifted away. Daniel waited longer, his body frozen in place. Finally, when the sound of their voices faded into the storm, he exhaled. Lyra's glowing eyes looked up at him, tears running down her face. Why do you risk everything for me?" she whispered again. Daniel brushed snow from her hair, his expression serious. "Because no one deserves to die alone in the snow. Not you, not anyone." For a moment she only stared at him, then slowly, she reached out with her trembling hand. Her fingers brushed his. A silent bond was formed in that frozen hollow, stronger than any words. But Daniel knew this was only the beginning. The hunters would not give up. They would chase them until the end of the world if they had to. He looked at the horizon. where the storm clouds began to part, and pale sunlight broke through. "Come on," he whispered, lifting her again. "We're not done yet." And with that, Daniel carried Lyra deeper into the unknown wilderness, unaware that the hunters were already regrouping, sharper, angrier, and more determined than ever to capture the cursed girl who had somehow survived the night. The storm had slowed by the time Daniel carried Lyra deeper into the wilderness. The morning sun was pale and weak, but it gave just enough light for him to see the endless white land stretching in every direction. His breath rose in clouds and his arms ached from holding her for so long. Yet he refused to set her down in the snow. Finally, he spotted a small cave at the base of a frozen hill. The entrance was narrow, hidden by icicles. Daniel pushed his way inside. The air was damp and cold, but at least the cave offered shelter from the hunters. He laid Lyra carefully on the ground, still wrapped in his coat. Her glowing eyes flickered open. She looked weak, her voice soft. "You should leave me, human, if they catch you." "It will be your death too." Daniel shook his head, brushing frost from his hair. "I told you already, I'm not leaving you. So stop asking." For a long time, she said nothing. Her gaze drifted to the cave walls. She seemed to gather strength, then finally whispered, "You don't understand who I am. Why they hunt me." Daniel leaned closer. His voice was calm but firm. "Then tell me, Lyra. I want to understand." Her lips trembled as she spoke. "My people cast me out. They call me cursed. They believe my bloodline will bring ruin to them all." Daniel frowned. "Bloodline?" She nodded weakly. "I am not just anyone. My mother was Queen. I was born with a mark that glows when the storms come. The priest said it was a sign of disaster, that I would bring death to my people. So they gave me to the hunters. They told them to throw me into the snow until the storm swallowed me." Daniel's fists clenched. His jaw tightened with anger. He could not believe what he was hearing. They abandoned their own child because of some prophecy? Her eyes filled with tears. "Yes, I grew up in shadows. Never allowed to play, never allowed to laugh. Always watched, always called cursed. They waited until the storms came, then sent me out to die." Daniel sat back, his heart heavy. He looked at her glowing skin. Her trembling hands. He saw not a curse, but a girl who had suffered for things she never chose. He shook his head. "They were wrong. I don't see a curse. I see someone worth saving." Lyra stared at him in shock, as if no one had ever said those words to her before. Her voice broke. "You don't know what you're saying. Human, if the hunters catch us, they will kill you. They have killed others for far less." Daniel leaned forward, his eyes steady. "Then they'll have to go through me first, for the first time." She smiled faintly, though it was sad. "You're different. I've heard stories about humans that you are stubborn, that you fight for things others give up. Now I see it as true." The silence of the cave grew heavy. Outside, the snow crunched faintly. The hunters were still searching. Their growls echoed in the distance. Lyra flinched at the sound, but Daniel placed a hand over hers. "As long as I breathe, they won't take you," he promised. Hours passed in uneasy quiet. Daniel built a small fire from scraps of wood he carried. The flames lit the cave walls, casting shadows. Lyra leaned against him for warmth. Her glowing eyes studied him carefully. "Why are you not afraid of me?" she whispered. "Others look at me and see doom." Daniel met her gaze without hesitation. "Because I see someone who's been alone too long, someone who deserves a chance." Her lips parted as if to reply, but then her body tensed. Her ears twitched, and she whispered sharply, "They are near." Daniel's body stiffened. He could hear it too, the hunters' voices outside. Harsh and cruel. They spoke in their language, but Daniel caught the meaning. "Search the caves. She must be inside. The cursed one cannot escape." Daniel put out the fire quickly, plunging the cave into darkness. He pulled Lyra closer, whispering, "Stay quiet. Don't move." The hunter's footsteps grew louder. Crunching closer to the cave entrance, Daniel gripped his rough spear tightly. His heart pounded. If they came inside, there would be no hiding. Lyra's glowing eyes looked at him. Full of fear, she whispered, "You should run. Save yourself." Daniel shook his head sharply. "Not without you." The sound of claws scratching against stone filled the cave. A shadow moved at the entrance. A hunter sniffed the air, growling low. Daniel's grip tightened on the spear, ready to fight, but then something strange happened. Lyra's skin glowed brighter. Her trembling body released a faint light that filled the cave like moonlight. The hunter outside snarled, stepping back. Daniel looked at her in shock. "What's happening?" Her voice shook. The mark. It reacts when I'm close to death, it warns me. Or maybe it warns them. The hunters outside hissed and retreated, their voices sharp with fear. The cursed light, do not touch it. Leave this cave for now. Their footsteps crunched away into the snow, fading slowly. Daniel stared at Lyra, still glowing faintly in the dark. Her face was pale, but her eyes were strong. You saved us, he whispered. She shook her head, tears falling. No. I am the reason they hunt us. If not for me, you would be safe. Daniel placed his hand gently over hers. Listen to me. You're not a curse. You're the reason I'm fighting. And I don't regret it for a second. Her breath caught, and for the first time, true warmth filled her gaze. She whispered softly, Maybe I am not cursed after all, not if you see me this way. The storm outside grew quiet, but Daniel knew this was only a pause. The hunters would return stronger, angrier, but inside the cave something had changed. The human and the alien girl were no longer just survivor and stranger. They had become something more. Two souls bound together against a world that wanted them apart. The cave was dark after Daniel smothered the fire. Only the faint glow from Lyra's skin lit the walls like a soft lantern. She sat against the stone, her body weak but her eyes wide. Daniel paced near the entrance. His rough spear in hand, he listened carefully. But for now the hunters had gone. His breath came heavy. He knew this peace would not last. They'll be back, he muttered under his breath. Stronger. Angrier? Lyra hugged his coat closer around herself. Her glowing eyes followed him. You don't have to fight them. You've already done more than anyone ever has. If you leave me here, they might let you go. Daniel turned sharply, his face hard in the half-light. Do you really think I would walk away now? After everything? She lowered her gaze, ashamed. I only don't want to see you die for me. Daniel knelt down in front of her. His voice was steady but soft. Listen, Lyra. There are things worth dying for. Protecting you is one of them. Her lips trembled. Her eyes filled with tears, she whispered. No one has ever said that to me before. Silence filled the cave. Broken only by the wind outside, Daniel sat beside her, resting his tired body against the stone. For a moment, it felt as if the storm had given them a little time, but soon the cold returned, biting through the cracks of the cave. Daniel could feel it sinking into his skin. He looked at Lyra, her body shaking again. Her lips were blue, and her glowing skin dimmed like fading embers. He frowned, moving closer. You're freezing, she tried to smile weakly. I've been freezing all my life, she whispered. The cold always finds me. Daniel looked at the dim fire pit in the middle of the cave. He had no more wood, no fuel left. His mind raced. Then he took a deep breath, pulling her gently into his arms. Wrapping his body around hers, she stiffened in surprise. What are you? Sharing heat, he said firmly. It's the only way. Her glowing eyes blinked. Then slowly softened, she leaned against him. Resting her head on his chest, her body shook less as his warmth spread to her. For the first time since he found her. Her breathing grew steadier. The moment was fragile, quiet, filled with the sound of their breathing and the distant howl of the wind. Daniel looked down at her face, her strange beauty. Her strength hidden beneath years of suffering, he whispered almost to himself. You're not cursed, Lyra, you're just alive. Her eyes opened slowly, looking at him. You speak as if you believe it. I do, he answered without hesitation. They sat in silence, the bond between them growing like the small flame of a candle fighting the dark. But the peace broke when Daniel's sharp ears caught a sound outside. The crackle of torches. The growls of hunters returning. He stiffened, holding Lyra tighter. They're back. Her body went rigid, fear filling her eyes. This time they won't stop. They'll burn the cave. They'll trap us inside. Daniel clenched his jaw. His mind raced. He had nothing but a spear and his will. But he would not surrender her, not now. The shadows of the hunters flickered at the cave entrance, their bone masks glowing in the torchlight. One of them shouted in their rough voice, Human! You carry death in your arms. Give her to us, and we may let you walk free. Daniel stood, placing himself between Lyra and the hunters. His voice was strong. You'll have to kill me first. The hunters laughed, their voices sharp and cruel. Then so be it. The cursed one cannot be allowed to live. They stepped closer, their torches lighting the cave walls. Daniel tightened his grip on the spear. He could feel his heart pounding like a drum. The fire inside him burned hotter than the cold around him. Behind him, Lyra whispered, her voice shaking. You can't fight them all, Daniel, please. Leave me, he looked back at her, his eyes blazing. I told you. I'm not leaving you, not now. Not ever. The hunters lunged and the fight began. Daniel swung the spear with all his strength. Striking one in the chest, the hunter fell back with a growl, but another rushed in. Daniel kicked hard. Pushing him into the wall, the cave echoed with the clash of stone, growls, and Daniel's heavy breaths. But there were too many. Their spears flashed, one cutting across Daniel's arm. Pain burned hot, blood staining his sleeve. He staggered but did not fall, his eyes burned with fire. He fought like a man with nothing to lose. Behind him, Lyra cried out. Her glowing skin flared brighter. Her trembling body shook as if some hidden force was waking inside her. The hunters froze for a moment, fear flickering in their eyes at the strange light. Daniel didn't understand it, but he didn't care. He only knew this. He would fight until his last breath to protect the girl fate had abandoned. The battle raged in fire and ice. Human will against alien hunters. The cave shook with their struggle, but even as Daniel bled and gasped, his eyes never wavered, his fire would not die. Not while Lyra still lived, and outside, the storm began to howl again, as if the world itself was watching the clash of fate unfolding in the frozen night. The cave echoed with the growls of hunters and the sound of sharp claws scraping stone. Daniel stood between them and Lyra, his chest rising and falling with every breath. Blood ran down his arm from a deep cut, but he didn't stop. His grip on the wooden spear was firm. One hunter rushed at him, mask gleaming in the torchlight. Daniel stepped aside and slammed the spear into the creature's side. A roar echoed through the cave, but another hunter was already leaping forward, teeth bared. Daniel raised his arm in defense and took the blow, pain shooting up to his shoulder. Behind him, Lyra screamed, but her voice was not just fear this time. It was power. Her glowing skin suddenly flared brighter than ever, a pure white light spilling from her body. The air trembled and even the hunters stopped in shock. Daniel looked back, blinking through the brightness. Lyra was floating just above the ground, her eyes glowing like two stars. Her hair lifted around her head like she was caught in a silent storm. The air around her shimmered, heavy with something unseen. The hunters growled and backed away. The cursed light, one hissed. She awakens, but one of them didn't retreat. He stepped forward, raising his torch and shouting, "We end her now," before the storm answers her call. He threw the torch toward Lyra, but Daniel leapt, catching it in midair. The fire seared his hands, but he tossed it aside and charged the hunter, slamming into him with his shoulder. Both of them hit the ground hard. The cave shook again, and then everything went still for a heartbeat. Then, without warning, a deep, powerful sound filled the cave, like the sky itself had cracked. A wave of light burst from Lyra's body and shot through the hunters like lightning. They screamed, dropping their weapons, stumbling back. Some ran. Others crawled toward the exit in panic, shouting in fear. She is no longer cursed, she is chosen. Daniel lay on the ground, blinking up at the light that filled the cave ceiling like the glow of a new star. Lyra slowly floated down, her feet touching the stone floor. The glow dimmed, but her eyes still shone with power. She looked around, dazed, and then at Daniel. "You're hurt," she said softly. Kneeling beside him, Daniel grinned weakly. "You should see the other guys." She reached for his arm, placing her glowing hands over the cut. The light flowed into the wound, and slowly the pain faded. His skin mended, leaving only a scar. He looked at her in amazement. What are you?" She shook her head, her voice gentle. "I don't know, my people feared me, called me cursed, but now I feel different. Something inside me woke up when I saw them hurting you." Daniel sat up slowly, the adrenaline still in his veins. "You saved us." Lyra looked away, her voice trembling. "No, you saved me first. Again and again. When no one else would, you believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Outside, the wind howled louder, snow swirling into a blizzard again. Daniel looked toward the entrance of the cave. "They'll come back, won't they?" Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes, and they won't come with just torches next time. They'll bring the high priests, the war beasts, everything they fear me for." Daniel stood, gripping his spear again. "Then we meet them head on." Lyra stood too, her voice calm. "You can't fight them alone," Daniel smiled. "Good thing I'm not alone anymore." She looked at him, truly looked at him, and something passed between them. Deeper than words, a silent vow. They were no longer two broken souls running from death. They were something stronger together. The wind outside blew harder, sending snow in swirling patterns through the narrow cave opening. Daniel stepped forward and looked out. The blizzard was wild, but his eyes saw clearly now. He saw his enemy and he saw what he was fighting for. Lyra came beside him, her hands glowing faintly. There's a place. Beyond the black cliffs, my mother once told me it was a place of safety. No one dares go there, not even the hunters, Daniel nodded. Then that's where we go. But it's days away, she whispered. And we're both weak. Daniel looked at her with a confident grin. We've already survived the storm, the hunters, and your cursed light. What's a few more days in the snow? Lyra smiled, her first true smile since the moment they met. Her fear didn't vanish, but now it walked beside courage together. They stepped out into the storm side by side. The snow hit them like knives, but they didn't stop, and far behind them, deep in the icy mountains, the surviving hunters bowed before a shadowed figure in robes, whispering, "She lives," and the human stands with her. The robed figure raised its head slowly, revealing the markings of a high priest. Its voice was cold as death. Then the prophecy begins. Prepare the death beasts. The war for Lyra's future and the fate of a world that cast her out was about to begin. The blizzard roared like a living creature, shaking the frozen world. But through the storm walked two figures, one human, one alien, wrapped in the same coat. Moving step by step through snow that reached their knees, Daniel's legs ached. His body bruised and cold, but he didn't stop. He carried Lyra when she was too weak to walk, helped her stand when she stumbled. Her glowing eyes guided them through the storm. Like two stars in the darkness, they had escaped the cave. Escaped the hunters for now. But Daniel knew the danger wasn't over. Something darker was coming, something ancient. Do you think they'll follow us? Lyra asked, her voice faint in the wind. Daniel looked back over the snowy hills. They won't stop, Lyra. Not until they've erased everything you are. She lowered her head. Then maybe I should surrender. Maybe it's better if I disappear. Daniel stopped and turned to face her. No, he said firmly. You don't hide from people who hate you for being different. You walk straight through them, taller than before. Lyra stared at him, her lips parting. A tear slid down her cheek, frozen before it hit the ground. You speak like you've lived this before. Daniel gave a small smile. Maybe I have. They moved forward again through icy cliffs and white valleys. On the third day, the storm finally broke. The sun came out pale and soft, touching the snow like golden silk from a hilltop. Daniel and Lyra looked down at what seemed like a dream. A hidden valley surrounded by black cliffs, warm steam rising from hot springs. Strange glowing plants lighting up the ground in soft colors. Lyra gasped. This is it. This is the place my mother spoke of. They stumbled down the slope. Reaching the valley floor, the air here was warm, gentle, like the land itself welcomed them. Lyra fell to her knees beside a glowing spring. Dipping her hand in the water, a smile spread across her face, a real one, full of peace. Daniel sat beside her, finally relaxing for the first time in days. His body shook with exhaustion, but his heart was full. This place is untouched, he said. No hunters, no fear, Lyra nodded, her voice soft. Maybe here. I can start again. As the sun set, they built a fire with dry wood they found under the rocks. The glow from the plants made the night feel safe. Lyra sat close to Daniel, leaning her head on his shoulder. You changed me, she said quietly. You showed me that I'm not a curse. Daniel looked at her. You were never a curse. You were just waiting for someone to see you. Tears formed in her glowing eyes. And you did. They sat together in silence, the fire crackling. The stars returning above but far away. In the snowy mountains, evil stirred in a dark temple buried in ice. The high priest of Lyra's people knelt before a mirror of frozen glass, watching the firelight flicker in the valley below. His voice was sharp as knives. The human has awakened her light. She must be taken before the bond is complete. Behind him stood a massive beast, covered in dark armor, its eyes burning red, the death beast silent and ready. But back in the valley, Daniel and Lyra knew nothing of what was coming. For the first time, they felt safe. Lyra took Daniel's hand, holding it gently. When I was alone in the snow, I thought I would die. I thought I was meant to, but then... You came. You didn't just save my body. You saved my soul. Daniel squeezed her hand. And you saved mine. As the fire burned low, Lyra leaned closer, whispering, What happens now? Daniel looked at the stars, then at her. Now, we build something new, something better, and when they come again, we'll be ready together. Lyra's glow shined brighter, not from fear, but from hope. Her eyes closed, and for the first time in her life, she slept without fear, and Daniel sat beside her watching the horizon, knowing the night was peaceful, but morning might bring war. Still, for now, there was peace. There was warmth, there was hope, and in a galaxy full of fear, that was more powerful than any weapon.